Good afternoon. We've just tipped midday, so it is afternoon. Very warm welcome to you all. It's amazing to see such a healthy room full of people. I was half expecting everybody to leave because it's kind of not the sexiest discussion panel topic, you know, like platforms and getting your music heard and all of those exciting things. But honestly, as Graham just touched upon, it's probably one of the most important things that we all need to address is our well-being, both as industry executives, creatives, whatever role you play in the industry. This one is super important because if you don't have that, you don't have anything. So we will take a seat. I'm very, very excited to be and happy to be working here with Jim, who I'll ask to introduce himself formally in a second. But Jim's got one of the most significant backgrounds and knowledges of all things related to health, well-being, and safety within the music industry environment. And as the production manager and tour manager for Linkin Park, has seen some pretty interesting situations at very first hand, some of whom, you know, some of these things are very poignant for us at this moment in time, obviously. And we will talk a little bit about that as we go forward. I too have had a few interesting experiences over the last 10 years of running my studio in Thailand, Karma Sound Studios. And statistically, I read that 1 in 5 artists or music industry professionals has a problem with either mental or physical health in their time during our working careers. And that is commensurate with my experience of bands that are coming through my studio. Typically, every act that comes through, one person or more has some kind of problem with drink, drugs, anxiety attacks, panic disorders, all kinds of things. And so we need to give them special care and attention, which we absolutely do. We take this issue very, very seriously. Jim has had to control this kind of thing all through his working life, over 3 decades at the front line of the industry. So, Jim, would you just please introduce yourself and let everybody know what you do?
Well, first, it's an honor to share a stage with you, Chris Cracker. I didn't know that I was going to get the opportunity to do that, and it's a real honor. Hello, everyone. I'm from the States. I started in the entertainment business at the ripe old age of 10 years old as the master of ceremonies of the May Day parade at 5th grade. And I knew from that moment that this was my life, that this was the thing that I wanted to do. I was a mediocre student, but on the stage and behind the scenes, I truly excelled and was never in a place where I confused the desire to be an artist on stage with being in a supporting role behind the stage. The supporting role suits me just fine. A brief story about why I ended up as a spokesman globally for safety. In 1983, in my first professional career, it was the grand opening of a massive nightclub outside of Philadelphia that was in competition with Studio 54. And this nightclub had a 22-foot diameter spaceship that tracked out over the house and delivered a robot on the floor, and the girls danced with the robot, and it said all kinds of things that you could say in 1983 that made people laugh. And there was other technical equipment from the ceiling that was happening throughout the night, as you know, lights coming up and down and special effects throughout the club. Well, on this grand opening night at midnight, when the spaceship was making its debut appearance, a lighting fixture, 800 pounds, fell from the ceiling and went through the skull of a woman 8 feet from where I was standing, and I was controlling that lighting fixture. It had not been safely installed. They were rushing to open. The contractors who were building the special effects had not completed the safety mechanisms. It was the last thing they did. And they did not put the stops on the end of the track, and they told everybody everything was 100% and ready to run, and there I was, a 19-year-old boy pushing the button on this thing, and it just went. That never leaves you. Being that close to death, being complicit in a death in some way, just doesn't leave you. Jump cut to 2011 when the stage collapsed at the Indiana State Fair, at the Sugarland concert, and 7 people were killed needlessly. That brought up the emotion from 1983 for me, and I said something has to be done, and created the nonprofit Event Safety Alliance to advocate for better safety in our profession across the globe. We don't have any barriers to entry in our business with respect to the technicians working backstage, and that's part of the glory of it. But at the same time, it's a miss to not at least say, you have to have some basic safety understanding before you join this business. So we've created this training. The Event Safety Alliance has created a fundamental training for safety. It's an online course. And our desire is to rewrite the roadie stigma and try to bring up the kind of people that we use in the business that are working backstage to be more safety conscious. That's how I ended up here, talking about safety. On the professional side, I've spent the last 16 years with Lincoln Park, 15 and a half to be exact, as their production manager, steering the ship all the way through to now. And it's been a tremendous experience. And of course, you all know about the recent loss of our Chester, and we'll be speaking about that. But that's, I think, enough of an introduction.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed, Jim. So, Graham, I don't know, are we able to put up that picture that we had? Great. So, either side of us here, you'll see a rather lovely family picture of Chester Bennington, lead singer from Linkin Park, with his family. And Jim, I think I'm right in saying that this was taken the day before his passing.
Can anybody show me suicide in this picture? That's his wife in the foreground, Talinda. Mm-hmm. And that great big grin is Chester. Does anybody see suicide? That was one day before he took his own life.
So, on that note, Jim was telling me this story last night, and I didn't share with you, but I'm actually in the middle of a project called ACBD, which are the 4 letters of the alphabet, first letters jumbled up. They stand for Appearances Can Be Deceptive. And the project is all about how actually none of us in our industry know really what's going on behind the eyes of any of us that we're all interacting with. So when Jim mentioned about this picture, it was pretty poignant. I didn't share this last night, but so I'm in the middle of this project. We're working on a whole bunch of video assets, photographic assets, which I would love this to be a part of because it's an absolutely fine example of what I'm talking about in this project. We're creating music. We've got people doing creative writing. And it's all around the fact that even from any photograph that we see, not even such as a simple organic photo like this, but photoshopped images, you know, the artists that you see are not exactly who they are when you see them in pictures. What you hear on a recording has been treated, auto-tuned, time stretched, time corrected. You know, everything we deal with in our industry is manipulated in some way, for better or worse, and in many cases that's all great. But this is the perfect example linked to this talk about how what you see here doesn't really tell the story of what was then to unfold.
So if I may, I've spent, you know, the last 15 and a half years being the last person he looked at before going on stage every night. There was a prayer that he did. There was a hug and a kiss between he and an I love you, and then I would say, now go fuck him up. And he'd go on stage and he'd go fuck him up. And, you know, I was gut checking this guy every night. And not once in this journey would I have told you that this outcome was going to be the one. Although I think, you know, we knew of Chester's demons, he knew of his demons, he spoke of them eloquently. But we thought because of how eloquently he spoke of them that he had them under control. Because it wasn't hiding anything, he was being outwardly explicit about them. And that's the kind of lull you get in this false sense of security around artists who are struggling with demons. That guy, by the way, is not the guy who took his own life. The demons took his life. He didn't take his own life. Because he was texting right up to the last minute to his bandmates before he got on an airplane saying, hey, I'll see you tomorrow. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I'm going to be doing a commercial shoot. It's going to be amazing. And then 1 minute of silence came. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a very, very poignant tale and one that is not uncommon. Many of you will also be familiar with the club of people that are 27-year-old and leave our industry as well. Obviously, famously, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, Jimi Hendrix, Mark Bud. The list goes on and on. Brian Jones, it's a fascinating thing. Mostly, all of those people had similar demons that were exemplified in Chester's life as well. And so what we're here to talk about today really is a little bit about looking at these case studies and seeing why these issues happened, what we can do about them, and what the future would hold really to try and resolve some of these issues going forward, to try and alert people to dealing with the conditions that are involved with this. For 7 months, 18 months ago, I had a young man staying at my studio called Peter Doherty, who's the lead singer of the Libertines. And his record label, EMI Virgin, had the foresight and the vision that the Libertines could reform if Peter got well enough from his very, very well-documented addictions to crack cocaine, heroin, alcohol, everything really. Peter does it all. And so they astutely put him into rehab to try and detox for a while, for up to 9 months I think he was in. And after about 8 or 9 months he came to stay with me. And my recording studio is a residential one. It's a little bit like a resort with studio facilities in it. So we were a perfect next stop for him to be in safe conditions and then to try and create during that time. Within 40 minutes of arrival, he wanted to know where to score. So the detox thing had worked to a point and he was under control, but still he needed chemical assistance to carry on his life because for this young man, without taking drugs, his body just doesn't function and certainly his mind doesn't function. Taking drugs doesn't solve anything, it just manages the process for him. And this was a fascinating thing for me to have to deal with this on a day-to-day basis because we were dealing with a very dangerous set of health circumstances, every minute of every day. So we had somebody awake 24 hours a day looking out for this guy. Very fortunately, we got through that 6 or 7 month period and the band joined him for the last 6 or 8 weeks of that and made an album, which has then gone on to do extremely well all over the world. It's resulted in them doing something like 60 shows thereafter, and it's generated a whole new industry for that band and all the peripheral people around it. So that was a mild success story. Peter's demons have not gone away. He's still controlling them by taking chemicals. And I wanted just to talk really with you, Jim, just about how a band on tour can deal with that set of circumstances, because we had also a scenario within the band where all of the guys had used drugs to control emotions and the highs and lows of performance, coming off stage, the worries of not being able to create without substance use or abuse. And so then there was a little bit of peer pressure of some using, some not, some wanting not to use in front of others, and all of those things. Have you dealt with that kind of thing with bands on tour, or Linkin Park in particular?
Not with Linkin Park. It's a surprisingly sober environment with Linkin Park. In the back of the room is Rob McDermott, Linkin Park's original manager, being hugged and now being forced to have his hand up. And he said something really important last night. That part of the issue is, when you go from a developing band into some modicum of success, you may be surrounded by friends and those who are not aware of the trappings that this brings, or who are just on for the ride and maybe part of the issue. And what we discovered in the early days of Linkin Park is that we had unintentionally allowed some of them to be surrounded by enablers. And it's when these enablers are part of the system They could be the manager. They could be the production manager. They could be the tour manager. Oftentimes they are those people, and oftentimes that's where the relationship starts in some of these artists. So as long as there are enablers on the road or in your environment, you're not safe. That's a really important thing to remember from the core, from the onset, is when the enablers are around, you're in trouble, because there's no getting away from it at that point. But the other thing, we've been working with the Grammy Foundation Music Cares to have a different discussion. It seems that we only talk about mental health after we lose someone. And that's the wrong time to talk about mental health. We should be talking about mental health preemptively. Now is when we should be talking about mental health. We all have to recognize that every one of you in this room, if you've had the pleasure of doing a show and hearing applause when the house lights go off, you're all drug addicts. Every one of us in this room is a drug addict. Those house lights go off, you get chills, your brain goes, tss, here's some dopamine. As soon as that dopamine goes in your brain, you want more. It's now got your adrenaline going. It's all the pleasure centers are stimulated. Tss, every time there's applause. End of a show, encore break, tss, more dopamine. And that roller coaster of naturally created chemical abuse is what leads to, I now need to fill the hole because I'm not doing a show, I'm not hearing the applause. Now, what's making me feel good about myself? I'm going to drink. I'm going to do drugs. I'm going to have a lot of sex, or I'm going to go gamble. All of these things are chasing the dopamine effect that you're getting naturally when you're on stage performing or working behind the scenes performing. There's a large number of folks throughout the world who are just guys and girls like me who are taking their life, and we're not the ones on the stage getting the biggest shot of dopamine. So these are things that we're not saying out loud. We're not recognizing these things out loud as we go through the course of our business, which we love so much. And one of the reasons we love it so much is we get the dopamine. And then when we're not getting the dopamine, we get on the bus and the curtain closes, or you get on the airplane, or you go to the hotel room after a show and close that door after you've just had all that dopamine, turn the lights off and it's quiet. Where's your high? You're not getting it. You're not getting that dopamine. And now you start thinking of things, well, I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to drink a bunch. Or I'm going to smoke a bunch. Whatever it might be. So we're not saying these things culturally to ourselves. It's not okay to have that discussion yet. But I would argue that the more we have this discussion, the more we recognize that, hey, it's not your fault. You're getting this chemical thing naturally in your brain. So let's talk about it. What are the things that we can do? What are the tools that can stabilize after? That's not the only problem. I mean, Chester had a real battle in his life for reasons that aren't only dopamine related, but one enhanced the other. And when you're really, I think, caught up in that mindset, you put the mask on. So I would argue that one of the things we need to do is start talking about it and acknowledge the fact that we're all drug users.
Anybody checking their Facebook right now? This is another source of how you get a quick shot of adrenaline, quick shot of dopamine to make you feel good. Yes, I got another 30 likes on my video that I posted yesterday. People are getting obsessed on social networks too, and there's a lot of medical and scientific evidence that this also is the first step into moving into an area where you may then need to counter the dopamine
addiction.
Rush effect. Yeah, and it's all to do with addiction. Anybody who's had any connection or investigated the activities of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous will know about that the initial concept of all of that is that addicts have some kind of disease, and diseases need to be treated. There are many ways to treat that, but as Jim says, the first step is actually talking about it and making it publicly a talking point so that we're actually actively thinking and sharing our experiences about it all. And Jim rightly also said it's not just the performers who suffer from these problems with the huge adrenaline and dopamine rushes of performing and coming off. Often it's the backstage guys. Sometimes when I'm working on a film soundtrack and we're doing 18, 19-hour days for 6, 9 months at a time, 7 days a week, that has massive effects on people. Very similar, really, because you're in the eye of the director or the composer on the project, that creates stress, tension, excitement, exhilaration, depending on what's happening in the whole pace of the album or the soundtrack that we're working on. And people deal with it in different ways. And a very high proportion of people just deal with it simply by drinking. And we've grown up for 5 or 6 decades in this industry where sex, drugs, and rock and roll has been the watchwords, really. That's defined the music industry and has provided part of the glamour. But the end result and the sad consequences of it are anything but glamorous. So one other area that I've been dealing with particularly has been in the area of creativity, and a lot of people will argue with me that they need to take heroin or cocaine in order to fuel their creativity, and that if they stop, then they may not write good songs anymore. I don't know whether, Jim, have you ever come across
No, but it's
that?
the question I posed to you last night.
Yeah.
Is this a possible outcome? If the demons are all addressed and silenced, is the thing that drives the lyric or that drives the fury in the music, does that go away? Does that get silenced?
Well, time will tell on that one, won't it? Because I think there is a consciousness just emerging now of mindfulness and people controlling their use. Certainly among the younger bands that I have through the studio, we have a remarkable number of vegans and vegetarians and people who are very conscious of keeping up physical well-being as well. So we have gym facilities at the studio and a pool, and I'm now getting very used to the fact that people are obsessed with keeping physically in good shape. And you were saying, Jim, that the Linkin Park used to make sure that they were in facilities where there were good physical facilities for them to keep in good shape, right?
Yeah, so it's true then also that working out and feeling good after a workout gives you the same kind of chemical response in your body. So it is potentially a tool in your toolbox to offset the desire to go out and do something other than that to feed the dopamine response. So working out is possibly a good tool for some to get there. But I would argue that maybe these effects are compounding, and maybe that's why we're seeing an increase in suicide, and that there is the thing with the phone. So that your phone goes beep, you don't know it consciously, but when your phone goes beep, you get one of these hits. And if that's happening from the time you're 5, my 5-year-old daughter plays on an iPad, and she sends me text messages, and I know that she's excited when they come back. Have I started her down a road of dependence on this dopamine hit? Does that then scale up and then scale up again as we continue to go through life? And maybe because the phones are out there right now and because this is a gateway drug to getting this dopamine response, maybe that's why we're seeing more of it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist or a scientist by any means. I'm just telling you from this humble point of view that
I've been researching this quite carefully and have been connecting with a bunch of psychiatrists, both in Los Angeles and in London primarily. And the people that I've spoken to have all concurred that, yes, the phone thing is a complicator and is likely to cause problems down the line, and already is amongst younger artists and musicians that are using it and are desperate to increase their self-worth and boost their self-esteem, and so likes and shares and communication online is the easiest quick fix.
my daughter just lost her iPad.
Well, the recommendations that I've got are just maintaining a healthy balance, whatever that may be. And that may be limiting its use. It may be defining which applications are used or whatever. It's very hard to control, though, Jim. Very hard.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I've been receiving this rush for a long time as well. And I've had my journey with drugs.
Yeah.
And fortunately, that ended before my children came along. It's hard to say what separates me from Chester. Why is it? Well, Chester had other demons, but why is it that I don't feel the desire to take my own life? and while going through this roller coaster. And what is it that's in my chemical makeup that's different in someone else's chemical makeup that does take their own life? And how do we identify those targets and play to them? Try to pull a person through to a different place. I don't know the answer to the question, but certainly having been stunned by the loss of someone I thought would never take his own life, I'm now inspired to try to find it.
So some of the results that I've found that have relatively unanimous approval of ways to control this, apart from the whole thing about talking about it, and before we wrap up today, we'll perhaps give you a few pointers on organizations that are there to help as well. But one of the things that seems to keep coming up in all of the research that I do is about maintaining rituals. And on Wake Up, this is a very important time because a lot of people in our industry, as far as I know, the minute they wake up, they're straight on their Facebook. They're straight away checking messages from colleagues all around the world, checking to see whether their video's increased in the streams or how the Spotify numbers are looking and all of these things. And we are, as an industry, becoming more and more data-driven. Therefore, this is going to be what we are going to be doing. But good recommendations to me are that maintaining a morning ritual of not switching your phone on immediately is absolutely paramount. The next thing you need to do is ideally meditate in some way, shape or form, even if it's 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever time you've got. And there are a whole load of great apps out there. One organization that we've...
Now you're back on your phone.
We are, but we have to be just using it in the right way, I guess, Jim. Yeah, right. But so disable Facebook for the time being. But
it makes sense, though. The app, I don't mean to make fun.
No.
The app is...
It's a very fair point.
I use a meditation app occasionally. I also stand in the shower and just stand there for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That get the blood flowing.
Yeah. It's not Headspace by any...
Headspace.
Yeah. So we're working a little bit with these guys, and they realize very much the problems that people in our industry face. And so they're developing special meditations and things that you can listen to that will have specific relevance to our chemical makeup within the music industry and actors and entertainers generally. And it's all about controlling dopamine. It's all about controlling adrenaline and all about controlling cortisol. Cortisol's the stress chemical that we get in our bodies. But some people are also addicted to that, and I would actually put myself in that category as well. So anybody who suffers from workaholism is typically using cortisol and finding that as a necessary part of their chemical makeup as well. So Headspace, check it out if you don't already know about it. It's free, right? The first bit.
So do you think that food is part of this as well? And the reason I ask is, I don't know about you folks, but I eat like doo-doo when I'm on the road. It's the worst kind of food with the worst kind of regularity, and I wonder if there's a compounding effect there. Because
I really believe there is. And when I was making a lot of location recordings, particularly in America, in New York, first stop would be go to Zabar's in the morning and load up with all the worst food possible, probably full of carbs and stimulants, to get us through the writing and production day. And that really was the habit. And I did it for months and months and months. And then no time to exercise, eating badly, crack open a bottle of wine at the evening to try and relax, do it all over again for months and months and months on end. And yes, I do, in answer to your question, believe that food is very much a part of this as well. If you add in the complication that artists and band members need or want to look good on stage, then having good dietary habits is even more paramount. And then if they're eating too much and drinking too much and not exercising enough and they get fat, they're not sleeping enough, everything goes wrong, and then
they take more drugs.
Exactly. Or they become bulimic and then move towards anorexia to try and still look skinny on stage. There aren't many fat heroin addicts in my book.
Yeah. It's odd that in the States that right now we're prescribing addiction. The doctors, the dentists are giving away the the oxycodones and the heroin-based drugs like they're candy, and we're putting that across our entire country, and nobody's doing anything about it.
And here in Asia, you can buy them across the counter.
Oy. Does anybody in the room feel like they suffer from any of these things? Yeah. Do you want to? Is it a good time to?
Sure. Let's open up. If anybody wants to.
I know you may have some other.
No. I think we've covered the things that I think we wanted to.
Can we get a
touch
microphone
upon.
over here?
This is such a massive topic that 40 minutes is clearly not enough.
And I don't think we're doing anybody any service if we don't open it up. I really think we have to,
absolutely.
yeah.
The wrap-up line would be, let's talk about it. So anybody wants to share anything, whether it's to do with phone addiction.
Chris, just if you want to steal 5 more minutes, please, because it is a very important subject. So
Thank
do
you
add
very
another
much.
5 minutes.
Thank you. Let's see how we
Did you want to say anything about it?
No,
Please stand up and tell us your name.
Javier.
Javier.
Whaler. Yeah, I'm a musician and music producer as well. And I completely resonate with everything you've been saying. I've been a professional musician since I've been 15. And probably have like 29 years of addiction in one way or another. And it's absolutely truth. I mean, in every situation. I mean, I lost a really close friend of mine that was a music producer doing an album of mine, and he took his life. I've been with drug addicts. I've been with alcohol, people that are sex addicts. And I've been in a few of those throughout my years as well. And I think it's very important as well to think, if you're going to be in the long game, it's very important to see not only how to control that, but have really strong values. Because I think one thing is thinking that you can have that one-hit song. Another thing is, okay, if you really want to do this for the rest of your life, I think you have to battle every single scenario and be really strong-minded. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. You're not going to have longevity.
Yeah. Or it's going to end quickly and poorly for you, yeah. And I think, part of the problem for a person like myself who's on the other side of artists like yourself is it my place? Have we created a relationship where I can go, hey, I'm worried about you, or what are the right words to say when, if Chester had shown any signs of this, what could I have said? And that's part of the tools I don't think that we're properly equipped with yet, but we're advocating that those of us who are in the supporting roles understand more about the disease and the way to approach it. And gosh, I a million times a day, I think to myself, what was leading up to the last few days and what could I have done different? Why didn't I see this? Why didn't I know that the anniversary of Chris Cornell's death was significant enough that he shouldn't have been left alone on that day? I don't know. I know them now, but damn it, it's too late. I should have known that then, and maybe I could have made a phone call to somebody and say, hey, you know what? It's the anniversary of Chris's death today. Don't leave Chester alone. And that scenario plays out all day long. You don't want that. So we're looking for those tools, and I think part of coming to understand those tools is talking with the artists, talking with each other. How do I let you know I'm worried? What do I do? Sir.
Also,
sorry, go ahead, Javier.
So a quick thing as well. I think it's quite important now that we swim in with technology. Let's say creative people, we've been used to being very highs and very lows already, but I'm also quite interested to know your point on people that are perhaps not that creatively driven, but they're actually exposed to, as you say, as an addictive environment. I see it in my mom using Facebook, and she's worse than a lot of people I've seen. So that's actually quite an interesting point to know from you.
Yeah.
If you actually been thinking about that side.
We have, and we've been
social
talking with professionals on both sides of the pond about these very issues. And again, anybody who's had any relationship with AA or NA, there are affiliate organizations called Al-Anon, which are for the family and relatives of people who are around people who suffer from addiction. And often those people suffer from immense stress because of being around the addicts as well. So the problem is endemic. Without sensationalizing it, almost a month doesn't go past where someone in our industry comes to the fore. Chester was one, Chris was the month before. Before that I work closely with the Amy Winehouse Foundation, and through their Hallowed Doors, girls come through that are suffering from these problems, largely from the music industry, and some of them are people that are wanting to get into the music industry, and they're already suffering from these problems and identifying with the problems that Amy had. So one other message I would want to get across today is, because I think we've got a lot of people here that maybe at the start of their careers as well, is be careful what you wish for, because everybody starts out in this industry wanting success, fame, adulation, to boost their self-worth and increase their self-esteem or whatever through exposing their art and having acceptance of it globally. But with that comes a whole bunch of issues that we all need to talk about and try and control and help each other with.
Yeah, and I think it's important that if you do hit that place, make space for someone, anyone who's is sober, who knows you, and that you allow that person to give you a pause when the time is necessary. I would argue that in the early days with Rob at the helm as manager, there wasn't the opportunity for us to inject ourselves. That was a brick wall. And I think that's another thing, a part of the education process with young artists is you make sure that you've got somebody, you go have fun, have a blast, enjoy the benefits, but at least let this person say, hold on, let's take a time out. Sir, you had something you wanted to add.
Well, I was just going to add, I fortunately never had any sort of form of drug or alcohol addiction, but what I suffered from, and I think a lot of artists, was anxiety. I had a huge anxiety, which actually led me to take fortunately I didn't have an addictive personality, but some of the people around me who were suffering from the same issues, they got sucked in. Similar to Javier, I lost 2 friends through a similar situation. But anxiety in the industry that they're in, I think a lot of young people, especially now with the social media and the constant of portraying and photo, the selfie, the everything, I don't think how much they realize that the anxiety will build up inside, and actually how much the anxiety plays a part in leading to, like dopamine gets rid of the anxiety, completely gets rid of the anxiety, and I know that. And so that's what you're saying, when that hit, and that's what these Facebook things are doing, but they're not actually addressing the issue. And all the artists I've seen come through my door with anxiety, quite bad anxiety, and doing that, unfortunately, a lot of the ones I've seen have ended up with other addictions as well, right, because that's not been enough after a while. So, like I said to you, the whole phone thing, everything.
Yeah. And the anxiety part of it is, you don't realize, you don't think of it this way, but why didn't that person text me back? I just texted him 20 seconds ago. Why didn't they text me? That's what we're talking about. That's the anxiety. You're doing that to yourself. And you have to, I think we have to say, consciously remind ourselves or each other, dude, it's just a phone. It'll come when it comes. I started in the business, there was no cellular phones, there was no computers. It went out by snail mail or FedEx or fax machine, and you'd stand at the fax machine going, when's that fax gonna finish coming through, You get half a page. And that's anxiety. We just don't talk about it that way. Thank you for your point.
Yes, thank you. The other anxiety issue, obviously, relating to performers is stage fright and going on stage and that 40 minutes before the show kind of thing, which I'm sure Jim's
which
dealt
leads
with.
to dulling the senses before you go on the stage,
exactly. Right? 30 to 35 years ago, I was a professional musician playing in the London Symphony Orchestra back in the UK, and there were a group of us that did suffer from performance nerves, but we thought we'd had it completely sussed, and a bunch of us used to take beta blockers and a large gin and tonic literally 10 minutes before going on stage, and that would get you through to the first half, have another drink in the interval. We wouldn't play drunk by any means, but we did use substances to enhance our performances.
I worked with an artist in the 90s. The bass player would not go on stage until he finished his first bottle of Jack Daniels, an entire bottle before he went on stage. And then you wouldn't know it. He was out there having a good old time and able to keep his legs. And then by the end of the show, he had finished his second bottle of Jack Daniels. So it's out there. And at that time, what do you say? That's that person's thing. What does a person like me who's not a part of the brotherhood, the fraternity, the sisterhood that is the band, how do we say, hey, man, you can't have that Jack Daniels before we got stage? That's silly. Look at what you're doing to yourself. Those are the hardest words to find, I think, and it's the hardest door to open to have that conversation. And that's what I think we need to change as an industry, and the way we change that is we share our stories, and we have these kinds of conversations, I think, and
Absolutely.
we make sure that we put it into the young folks who are starting to break out in the industry. There was another question or comment, please.
Hello, I'm Maren.
Hi.
I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I feel like there needs to be ways, like we can talk about it, but we actually need to find strategies of finding a natural high. Like at the moment, I've just started 3 weeks ago, instead of going on my phone, I do 3 pages of conscious writing. First thing that comes
That's
out.
absolutely the stuff.
Yeah, and it's a 12-week course that I'm doing at the moment, just reading a book that was written like 10 years ago called The Artist's Way. Yeah. And I hope to continue that because I actually see such a change in my day, in the way I am, because I haven't become addicted to my phone. And we can say like, yeah, it's just a phone, but the way society has built it, it's like a god, you know, like if we're not getting that gratification from someone else on our phone, it's really difficult, especially as an artist, because I feel like we need to have an internet presence to make us feel legitimate, you know? Yeah. And I think it's such a toxic thing when we have our phones that interrupt us from the present moment, because we have all these images flying through, and rather than them inspiring us, it just becomes this like, I'm not as good as that, I want to be achieving that. So I think that there needs to be people from the get-go in the industry teaching us how to find a natural high and just being like, I've got my creativity, I'm here, and life is what is exciting me, not, you know? So, yeah.
Really good points. Really, really good points.
Yeah, and Javier mentioned about almost the self-respect thing and having good boundaries for yourself. The number of conversations I have with industry professionals whilst they are on their phones in front of me, honestly, it's every day I'm experiencing this, and I've done it to people as well. I'm now much more conscious of it myself, and I enjoy being present and talking one-to-one with somebody and being able to eyeball them and actually be present, yeah.
It's fantastic. Young lady, you had a question as well. We just got our 5-minute bonus round, so let's blast through these questions.
Hi, my name is Marian too.
Hi, Marian.
Hi, Marian 2, Marian 1, Marian 2. Nice to meet you.
Hey, I'm a singer-songwriter here in Singapore. I actually battle with panic disorder and secondary depression. So I just wanted to ask, like, as a person who's a part of the team of the artist, like, how do you deal with an artist who is having trouble with that kind of thing? Because I understand that it halts the process of like recording and, you know, writing and performing even. So like, how do you deal with that?
Okay, so yes, aligned to the issue of people thinking that if they take heroin or acid or LSD, they'll be more creative and write better and more interesting songs. People who suffer from depression also can write great sad songs and really touch the hearts of people, because we probably all can be attuned to this in some way, shape or form, and it's just when it gets excessive, then it becomes a problem. How we deal with it at my studio when we have people who are suffering, and like I say, it's nearly every act that comes through, we have to give some kind of emotional support to, whether that's subtle or overt or managed or micromanaged. It happens all of the time. So we encourage people to get into kind of routines. The first thing in managing it is waking up and feeling good. So often at our studio we'll have a lady in that helps people do some yoga or some Pilates or something out in the fresh air. We're lucky in this kind of climate. We have beautiful weather most of the time. We go out on our sala and we either meditate or do some yoga, this kind of thing. It's a really great start to the day. We then have some healthy food, and unlike being in a city studio when we're ordering Kentucky Fried Chicken, shouldn't name any names at all, but fast food or slightly less healthy foods, we make sure that our artists are eating well and are sort of feeling good from that point of view. The only beverages on offer most of the time free of charge are water and green teas and other things, but the less caffeinated varieties, if we can get them. We try and suppress any alcohol being present for people during the daytimes, but all the way through, if people are suffering from panic attacks or depression, we try and provide one-to-one support. So we like people to talk and share, and all my staff are well versed in this because we've had some pretty torrid occurrences witnessing people suffering from these problems. And so all of my staff, even if they're the 19-year-old intern, we absolutely have them involved in the knowledge base of how to deal with people. And it's largely around talking, making sure that they're eating and drinking sensibly and well, exercising and doing stuff other than the creative muse as well. So we try and get them doing other stuff other than being tense in the studio all the time. It sounds like it's a great thing to be in a studio 18 hours a day creating, and often it is, but it creates underlying tensions.
Well, and it's also about no judgment. I mean, we especially in the entertainment business, cannot be in the judgment zone. That's not who we are. Leave that to the politicians. You know, our thing is everybody's accepted. That's the way that our business, that's what's so brilliant about our business. And when you set up an atmosphere of, you're welcome here no matter who you are, what you are, how you dress, whatever. And
whatever stage you're at.
Whatever stage you're at. And, you know, I know in the case of Chester, he had a horrible childhood and didn't know how to appreciate the space that this is, you're healthy here, we love you, we support you. There is no judgment. And oftentimes these creatives come from that. A lot of creatives come out of turmoil in their childhood because the child brain, when it gets affected with something like molestation or things of that nature, it doesn't know how to process that. And it turns a switch from that day forward that can never be unturned. And a lot of times that manifests itself in suicide.
So I think, just to wrap up, be present, give people time, and give them love and support and acknowledgement for what they're doing, whatever stage they're at in their careers.
Did anyone have anything else pressing they wanted to add? I think we can do one more maybe?
Okay, yeah, we can. Yeah.
I'm Miguel, and I am part of a band called Ben and Ben from the Philippines. And my question is, one of the most common problems that we have is that our sleeping patterns are very, very irregular. I mean, I think for most of us.
I'm a chronic insomniac too,
Yes.
yeah. Less than 4 hours a day, yeah.
And because the schedule of sleeping when recording is different and when touring is different. And how do you guys, are there any methods to deal with it or something?
I just came from Philadelphia to Doha to here Friday night. This is not the answer to your question, but I just turn off the whole thought process about sleep. I sleep when I can, and I'm awake when my best ideas come at 3 o'clock in the morning, unfortunately. And I guess because it's 30 plus years on the road in awful sleep patterns, that now that's my norm. But can you answer it better than that?
Well, I've done 8 flights in 10 days as well. So, and I am a chronic insomniac, and I did commute as the senior vice president of the commercial division of Sony. I lived in London and the job was in New York. I used to fly on a Monday and come back on a Friday. And I don't mind putting my hand up and confessing that during that time, the way I coped with the sleep thing was to drink the best part of a bottle of red wine and take 10 milligrams of Valium. And 3 years of doing that was not smart. It didn't kill me, but it was my way of dulling down all the anxiety things, getting some sleep. But now I use Headspace. I keep hydrated, I eat well, and like Jim, I just sleep when I can. So the other night I was meant to be meeting up with Graham again, and actually I hit a wall and just had to sleep. I got, I think, 2 hours sleep when I was awake again at 1, but it is part of the system. But get it when you can and meditate. Those are the
I don't acknowledge sleep.
Well, listen, I think we're well over time, but I wanted to thank the organisers, Graham, particularly for allowing us to take that extra time. I would really sincerely like to thank all of you for being present here to share in what we've been discussing. We don't have all of the answers. There are some answers. There's been some great points made here, and thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
It's been amazing.
Rob, did we miss anything? Okay.
Good. If there's anybody needs any help, you can find me very easily. You can just type in Karma Sound Studios, and my email address is on the website of our studio. There are amazing organizations like Music Cares, Music Support, the Amy Winehouse Foundation, Behind the Scenes Support Act. There's a lot of help out there if you really need it, but feel free to contact me anytime, okay? Thank you very much indeed for having us.
And above all else, take care of one another. You owe it to your friends. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. Thanks, Chris. Group hug. Come on.